No.
Well, that's why Dobby gets a front and center seat today, because we are not happy with Dobby's absence in this story. And Winky, we'll talk about that in a minute.
Have to fill me in.
Oh, the bird?
Justice for Winky.
No, we'll explain Winky's story, because Winky doesn't come in the book at all, and Winky's a very important character.
Critical to the story.
She's so critical to the story. So I'm gonna fill in some gaps today.
Okay.
Winky is a house elf who gets no storyline in the movie. And I'm going to clarify a couple of things today.
That's the only house elf in the movie.
Yeah, well, later there's the preacher comes in, but.
Yeah.
Well, Winky is Barty Crouch's house elf. Barty Crouch was the man in charge of the competition. So I need to spend some time on the backstory of Barty Crouch, just a little bit. And Chris said, you can get through the movie without understanding Barty Crouch's story. And I said, yes, you can get through the movie. But to quite understand the depth of what is going on with just the relationships of good versus evil and the people who are like fighting against it, while at the same time not knowing if Voldemort's ever going to actually come back, I think that it would be important for us to just build that piece of the world a little bit now. So that's how I wanted to start. What we see at the beginning is the Wizards are at the World Cup.
But no, the first thing is that they just sort of, we're all together, and Phil says, where are they going? What are they doing? Because he forgot.
Oh, that's true, that's true. Okay, so we'll backtrack, because one of my snacks over there, the gold wrapped candies, do not make an appearance in the movie. So I'll explain why they have been made. This is the first of the Weasley's Wizard Wheezes snacks. There will be more next week. Just get ready. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. And I can't guarantee they're all going to taste good, but I'm going to try and make them all. There's like 4 or 5. But anyway, the Weasley twins are starting to dabble in finding a way to make some money, right? They have a family of very little income. And they are not academics. They're not that adventurous like one of their brothers. They're just trying to find their way. And so they're like, jokes, magical tricks and things. Hi, Lois. And so these brothers are starting this owl order service business where they're selling trick snacks to people who want to buy them through the internet, sort of. And the mother gets furious because when they go to pick up Harry for the Quidditch World Cup, they skip that part in the movie, but they go to his house and pick him up, and there's a whole debacle with that. But the twins accidentally let some of these treats fall. Dudley picks one up, eats it. Mr. Weasley is still there with Harry, and it's called Tongue Toffee. And Dudley's tongue just becomes enormous. And so they get home, finally all of them make it back to the house, and Mr. Weasley tells Mrs. Weasley what has happened, or it comes out what has happened. He didn't really want to tell her, but basically they're like, how dare you do this to muggles? This is why we have bad relationships with muggles and wizards. And then the twins said, we didn't do it to him because he's a muggle. We did it to him because he's so wicked to Harry. Like they were trying to get back at him, right? Yeah. So they were justifying themselves. But yeah, that's why I have those candies. So yes, there was backstory before we even get to the Quidditch World Cup. Team Ireland, got my shirt. Oh, Chrissy joined us online. Yes, Chrissy made the shirt for me. I'm very happy about it. I'm excited, so thank you. And so I want to explain a little bit of the backstory with the Quidditch World Cup that brings up Winky and helps us to kind of figure out the predicament that Barty Crouch is in, because I think that there's good conversation in Barty Crouch's story. So Percy is Ron's brother. He's just graduated from Hogwarts. He just finished his last year. And he is now Barty Crouch's assistant. This is not in the movie. And Percy gets no other screen time. And Percy slowly starts to find his way towards the ministry side, the dark side, whatever is happening, it's things that are against his family's wishes. So we're going to be looking at some of that over these next few weeks, but today is the first day where we're really starting to see people have to pick sides a little bit. Dumbledore even says right at the end, there's going to come a time where you have to make a choice between what is right and what is easy. And so that's kind of the theme of this week, is that transition from choosing what's right and choosing what's easy, because the wickedness is starting to bubble up a little more obviously to some already. Whereas in the past books, it was much more just Harry versus Voldemort. And now it's starting to be the wizarding world against the wizarding world. And there's people trying to bubble up now that are ready for Voldemort to return. And so we get to the Quidditch World Cup, and Percy's now working for Crouch. Crouch is the most pious, I would say, of the wizards in the ministry. He's very hardworking, but he also has a lot of arrogance. And we see that in the movie at the part where Harry falls into the memory of Dumbledore. He's in Dumbledore's office. Also, backstory for my snack over there, we have sherbet lemon candies. In the first movie, second movie, they call them lemon drops. It's Dumbledore's favorite Muggle candy. And Harry doesn't actually know the password to get into Dumbledore's office when Mad Eye Moody says, I think Harry's here, or whatever. Harry needed a password to get in, and he just tried to guess what the old password was to see if he could get through. And he guessed sherbet lemon, so there they are. But that was a contrast because it was actually lemon drop in the second book, and in the fourth book she said sherbet lemon, so she had a mistake with her wording, but whatever.
She's American, so we also have British for sherbet lemon.
Right. So our version didn't get the British translation, whereas some words sometimes, like they say nose down, and sometimes in America we say shut up, and then so they don't change those every time. But anyway, so I'm taking a long time here. Barty Crouch, he's like narrating for me, so sorry.
No.
Oh.
No, don't worry about it.
Okay, so Barty,
You know it's.
the man behind the curtain. So a lot of backstory there. Barty Crouch has everything to lose, right? So he is, we find out at the end, his son has just like brought the Dark Lord back. But he dies too, right? He's dead, but like even before, like if he had lived, his life was going to be over. He had a son who betrayed him. What does that mean to you before we continue on to talk about more from the book backstory? So let's think about Barty Crouch's situation and his son.
Well, he disowns him in the courtroom, if I remember correctly. I mean,
You're no son of mine.
yeah, I mean, that's serious stuff. It's okay for a kid to say it to his dad and mom.
You're no son of mine. No, that's.
No,
No, that's what he said. Yeah. Well, that is what he said.
I know, I just.
but, you know, because kids say that to mom and dad all the time.
I don't
But the
want to
parents
be
don't
here. I
wish-
want to leave. I don't like it here.
Right.
Let me pack a bag for you.
How would you feel if your life was built on prestige in the Ministry of Magic, and then here and finding dark wizards? So they said that he was the best, like Moody was the best dark wizard catcher, but Crouch was the most severe judge of dark wizards when they got into the court. What would that say for your legacy with this child who's
Into it.
into it?
His reputation would be immediately tarnished, like completely, because he's seen as a
He was like one of like the leading figures for Minister of Magic at that point, and then suddenly his son is seen as a Death Eater, and that's why he's stuck being the head of, I think it's the transportation. I don't know. He's the head of some department in the ministry.
Yeah, he ends up getting a more fluff department.
This is not the Minister of Magic or anything like that. He's just seen as like there's like a strike on his record.
Right.
Because it was like he's able to raise this Death Eater son. Like, oh, what does that say about him?
Will he convert to even? Yeah,
I
there
don't
could be.
remember what sorry.
No, the father is the one who heads up the Quidditch World Cup. So he's like in charge of getting that together. And then he's in charge of that Tri-Wizard tournament that comes to Hogwarts. He's the man with the
The
mustache.
I was just gonna say the mustache man. They find him without his hat in the woods.
Right, yeah, he's dead in the woods there right after the gillyweed water incident.
Seems like the ultimate betrayal though, right? To go that far away from what your parents are doing.
How'd he die?
Oh, sorry. I was looking up what he was the head. What department he was the head of.
Side note.
How did he die?
I forgot about that.
He was transfigured. I can't remember. I know that there was like a bone left, and I don't remember how he died though. His son killed him though.
Oh,
Yeah, when he,
does it come out in the movie that it's?
Yeah.
Well, sort of. I mean, it's like, it shows the movie.
because his son is Mad-Eye Moody the whole movie.
Son is
His,
what?
his son, who he disowned,
Right.
was Mad-Eye the whole
Oh,
movie.
yeah.
He drinks the polyjuice potion. So they kind of show him tramping.
And he's got that tick with the tongue, yeah.
I thought he was trying to
And that
mimic
tick
the
comes
snake.
out right before he dies, and I think his son realized that he recognized him. Yeah,
The tick is from. I've always assumed the tick is from his like time in Azkaban. Like as short as it,
Maybe
or
like
maybe
trauma.
not even the time in Azkaban. Maybe it might be being under the Imperius curse for so long.
We'll get there in a second.
Ah.
I'll let you fill in gaps in a minute. I was just trying to go with what they know.
I think that his first reaction to learning his son was a Death Eater would be, I worked so hard to get to this point, blah, 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 blah. And after he digested that, I think the next thought would be, what did I do wrong? That my child, because I have to assume the household was brought up with the strict, good attitude. And to have your son, daughter, whatever, take the other road, it would be totally normal to feel a failure and to constantly say, where did I go wrong? What didn't I see? What didn't I react to?
I mean, Crouch Senior was kind of a complete alcoholic though. Before, like while his son was in Hogwarts and stuff, his mother was very like doting and very much spoiled the junior, but his father was definitely in the ministry more than he actually saw his son.
Yeah. And so the elements that we don't know from the movie that kind of build on this relationship, and they say it in the movie, but I don't know if you caught it, Barty Crouch Jr., and then we find out later, some other Death Eater people tortured with the Cruciatus curse. So the curse that makes you like jump and stuff and like feel really a lot of pain, but doesn't kill you. That curse was done over and over on Neville's parents. So it said the torture of Frank Longbottom and his wife. So they said that in the courtroom. So that was the primary thing he was being accused for, Barty Crouch Jr. was. And we do find out in the next one, I guess, that also Bellatrix Lestrange, if you remember her, she's got the frizzy hair, she's coming up in the next movie. She also was with Barty Crouch Jr. when they were torturing Neville's parents. Neville's story, I've said it already, it just doesn't get enough screen time for the character he is in the books. But so yeah, Neville's parents are incapacitated. He's raised by his grandmother. We do learn that in the second one, but first and second one. But anyway, so this Barty Crouch Jr., he ends up in Azkaban. The mother, as Caitlin says, was doting on him for his whole life and finally begged the father, please, Barty, can we get him out? I'm dying. Can we have him trade places with me? So she starts taking Polyjuice Potion to look like her son, and her son takes Polyjuice Potion to look like the mother, and they swap places in Azkaban. And we find out all this story when Barty Crouch Jr. takes the Veritas serum at the very end when he's telling the truth, but we don't get the rest of the story. So the mother's like, please, can I have my son free? So the father takes the son home, has him under an invisibility cloak, not one like Harry's, but one similar, and is just trying to keep him in hiding, basically, as a promise to his wife. And then eventually Barty Crouch Jr. escapes. He gets out at the Quidditch World Cup, and that's when that dark mark goes up in the sky. So you see Harry like black out on the ground, and you see out of the corner of his eye, he sees that man. He remembers seeing him in his dream, but he doesn't really know who he is. And so that's just helping to piece together some of that story, but really it was out of that mother's sacrifice. Another mother, like Harry's mother, just giving their all for the kid, and the kid like totally just, oh, I'm going back to the dark side. I didn't learn anything or whatever. So I just wanted to fill in that gap a little bit.
Thank you.
But I'll say a little bit about Winky and Dobby real quick, not to go into it too much because it's not really that pertinent to the story, but I know Gene misses Dobby. He didn't make his in this movie, he didn't get his debut again, but so Winky is the Crouch's elf. And Winky is the one in the book who's blamed for casting the dark mark. And so he disowns his elf. He gives her clothes and says, you're not my elf anymore. And so she has nowhere to go. She's freaking out. She's getting drunk off of butterbeer. She is a mess. Who comes to find her but the only other free elf around? Dobby. Dobby says, let's go talk to Professor Dumbledore. Maybe he'll give us work. And Dobby says, please, Professor Dumbledore, could we work for you? And Professor Dumbledore offers them days off and plenty of wages. And Dobby says, no, we don't need that much money. What would we do with all that money? And so they're like, we want to work every day. So Dobby and Winky go to work for Professor Dumbledore at the castle. So we never get to see Dobby hanging around the castle with Winky in the movies. It's kind of sad. We don't see Dobby again until the seventh movie? The seventh movie. So I just wanted you to know he is there in spirit. He has some more clothes.
In the book, Dobby, instead of Neville giving Harry the gillyweed, it's Dobby that gives Harry the gillyweed. So
That's a big deal,
he
right?
makes appearances.
Yeah, he's the one that ends up sneaking the gillyweed for Harry.
Is this the book when Hermione starts for like house elf rights campaign?
That seems like a very Hermione thing to do.
So Hermione, as a Muggle-born, recognizes injustices, and she's realizing how mean these people are being to Winky at this Triwizard or this Quidditch World Cup. And she decides to get back to school, and she is going to start the House Elf Liberation Front. And she calls it the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare. And the boys are like, who wants to join SPEW? And then she's like, it's not SPEW, it's SPEW. And so she's trying to like bring about awareness to these magical creatures that are not human wizards, that also are, you know, valid parts of their society, like the goblins or the centaurs or whatever. So not as much part of the main plot line, but it's nice to see that Hermione is trying to do some good in the world. And then, so with the Barty Crouch, now that we've expanded your world on understanding what's going on with him and his son, is there anything else ahas that came to mind when I shared those details and Caitlin added some in too?
Like you said, we're really getting into the good and evil.
Yeah,
Yeah, before it was Harry and Voldemort, but now we see this cloud starting to expand.
right. Yeah, I mean, literally, up in the sky, the dark mark showed up. Yeah. Did you want to add something?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
It also showed how frightened the response of the other wizards was not, well, let's stand our ground and stop this. It was, I'm gonna run like scattered rats.
Yeah.
Leave Harry in the dust.
Yeah. And I mean, the book shows it that way too. They all just kind of scatter. Yeah. And the one other element that I find interesting, that's left out is that not only are they walking through in these hooded cloak outfits and just looking ominous as these Death Eaters, also you could see they didn't show their faces. I mean, they were not
They had
ready
masks
to,
on.
yeah, they had masks on. They
They
weren't
looked like
ready.
a Ku Klux Klan.
They did.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
That was terrifying, and I
Yeah.
can see why they'd run,
Uh-huh.
because they all had torches.
Yeah.
And they were going around the camp just lighting up all the.
And
tents.
just to bring fear, just like we're ready to come back, and how terrifying. But the one piece that doesn't get shown in that scene that is in the book is that not only are they trying to elicit fear among the wizards, but these wizards have actually gathered in a Muggle campground, and they are trying to stay, like, they're supposed to stay discreet with their magic while they're there. But they end up getting these Muggles who are running the campground and torturing them. They're raising them up in the air in like really scary ways and torturing them. And the next morning, thankfully, none of them were killed. And the next morning, the good wizards had to go and like modify their memory so that they didn't remember being tortured. So just terrifying stuff. And again, that element that Hermione's trying to stand up for and saying like, no, we all deserve our lives. Like, quit trying to, you know, rank us, Death Eaters and everyone else. So I found that an interesting piece that I just wanted to share. So as we continue to look through, I want to make sure that today we also spend some time talking about Mad-Eye Moody as a person, not just as a polyjuice potion recipient or not recipient, victim, I guess. But also talking about Ron's storyline a little bit here, because Ron does get quite a bit of screen time when we're looking at his relationship with Harry. And not only that, but I would say it's his relationship with himself. Because Ron hasn't come into his own. He's really struggled with everything about his life. He is last, or at least second, right?
Hand-me-down.
So what were some of the elements for Ron where we know that he hasn't had the best?
Of course, the hand-me-downs.
The hand-me-downs
dress
was-
clothes.
yep.
I thought, oh my
The
God.
broken wine.
Why didn't Harry do
Right.
something?
Yeah.
Do something. Nice clothes.
Yeah, the unfixed broken wine, the ugly dress robe.
He didn't have enough money for his treats on the train. He was short for what he wanted to get.
And what about the mirror?
Yeah, Quidditch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being
Yeah.
captain, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that what he was?
And on the house top.
And head boy.
And his boy,
His brother, well, Bill was head boy, and then Charlie, who's the second oldest, was like an amazing Quidditch player. So those are all like things that his older brothers have achieved.
Right. Yeah, he's just, yeah,
In the movie, it makes a deal out of he can't afford stuff again
Right.
in the train. Is that,
The candy cart.
yeah, and it kind of,
yeah,
like, as I reflect on the movie, like that's, I think they're trying to set up that beat of him feeling like he's not measuring up at all.
right.
Yeah,
I was kind of surprised that Harry didn't
Yeah.
Me too.
offer to buy him some candy at least.
Well, yeah, but then that would make Ron feel even worse.
yes.
And I think he offered it to him in the first time, but this time Harry had another reason to be a bit distracted.
Oh, well, he liked that. That is young love.
Harry was stricken.
So I'll say this is my favorite thing I made yet.
They were good.
2 pumpkin pasties, please.
The relationship with Harry, he's like, oh, that's the guy that's with Harry Potter.
Right.
Hermione, everybody knows is bright and she knows everything and she's a Miss Know-it-all and everybody knows that, okay?
Yeah.
But Ron is just, oh, he's one of the Weasleys that hangs around Harry.
Right.
Always pushed in the background.
And I don't care how good a friend you are, that's gotta get in there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're human, it just.
Ron is also like very much still a child. Like Harry's had to deal with like constant abuse his whole life. He's matured much faster than a normal 14-year-old. But in the 4th book, they're still just 14 years old. Like those are like I'm around 14-year-olds pretty much constantly. They are very much children. You them a lot. They are.
She's a junior now.
Yeah.
Right.
Freshmen are very annoying. Like I just his maturity level just isn't there. Like he's grown up around loving parents, a good family house. Like even if he's poor, but he's still never
He still has
experienced
the
the
love,
hardships
yeah.
that Harry has or been through like the discrimination that Hermione has for being a muggle boy. Like he's been very sheltered. And I think that is a reason why he behaves how he does.
He seems very jealous in this movie.
Oh yeah,
Right?
that's a big character point for
The
him.
jealous horns are coming
So
out big
what's
time.
the straw that broke the camel's back for
The name,
The name getting called, right?
it? Coming out of the goblet, yeah.
And he didn't even trust that Harry didn't put it in himself. Right? That's a big deal for best friends. You know, he basically called him a liar.
I thought the other thing was, he tried to justify, I did tell you about the dragon. And I thought, after he said all these things, you've never even got close to telling him about the dragon.
His pride was in the way so much, but yet he did still care about his
Sure
friend.
he did.
He just didn't want his friend to know he cared about him right
Very much a
then.
Gryffindor.
Yeah,
Very much a Gryffindor at heart.
yeah, that was quite the strain on the relationship there in that moment. And I mean, I don't know who else dislikes this movie compared to all the others.
There's a different director in this one.
Yeah.
It's why.
But I feel like the drama and the tone of the teenagers who are acting in this one is just a bit much.
Yeah.
Hermione's acting is bad in this one.
So is Harry's. If you look in the train scene and just look at their faces, it's interesting how they're being.
I'm less compelled anyway than the other ones. It's like there's a gap. We had 1 through 3 and then we have 5 through 8. And then we have this
Well,
one.
this is what I was gonna say earlier, when you were talking about the 2 house elves. Like this movie doesn't have a ton of humor in it, and that could have provided some levity
Right.
in the movie, house elf.
I mean, she hiccups all the time.
Yeah,
Like
like
she's
this.
drunk on this butterbeer.
It could have
She's
been,
miserable that she's been dismissed by her abusive owner. Yeah.
yeah,
All of the books have some element of humor to it, and this movie just completely like strikes it out and focuses on, because it does get a lot darker as we
Oh,
go
yeah.
through them. But
Yeah.
this book is more transitionally still. It's
Yeah.
not directly into it like the
Right.
movie is.
Well, and also, I guess there is a bit of humor because the relationship of Fleur with Ron. So he's trying to swoon her, and they don't explain why in the movie, but she is part Vila because her grandmother was a Vila, and so a Vila is like a siren that like attracts men or whatever. So that's why Ron acts like he's in a trance around her, because literally she's putting off this aura or something that makes him drawn to her. So there's that. But do you guys recognize that this is the same woman who marries into Ron's
Yes.
family in the
Yeah.
second to
Yeah.
last movie?
That
As you're
gorgeous-
watching
that
through.
gorgeous gown.
Yeah, it's the
Is
same
this
girl.
one of the,
Yes, the blue girl that makes it into the championship ends up marrying one of Ron's brothers in the 7th movie.
Oh, okay.
So keep
I
that
didn't
in
know
mind, because they don't necessarily make it that.
Yeah, they really don't push some of those facts out.
Right, yeah. So she's the same person. Yeah.
I thought it was frightening with the swimming with, especially with Harry, with those sirens just trying to drag him down. I was like, they were trying to kill him. I'm like, really? This is not.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That was scary, yeah.
Yeah, all the tasks are like crazy, like with the Sphinx in the last task and like all the creatures in there. There's just so many things that could go wrong, and I feel like the adults don't do anything to stop anything.
Again, the failed
ever.
pedagogy at Hogwarts.
You know, this is tradition, so let's continue.
Especially the second task, like what could they have possibly like? It's a like dark lake in like January. There's no boring that has to be there. Like people are just sitting on the sideline.
Watching the black water.
Right? Were you gonna say something else, Lee?
Yeah, they're also bringing in the sexual issue of these are 14-year-olds. These are the times when you're suddenly realizing that the girl that sat in front of you is hot.
Yeah.
There was a lot of eye ladder moments.
And they definitely have that.
And, okay, if you go back to the championship, the Quidditch championship, who the hero of that is, okay, and Ron, you know, Ron is like, whoa, this is my hero, and who does he say to
I
me?
know.
I mean, like, I could picture him saying, I can't get arrested.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's another blow to Ron's ego, right?
Yeah.
Because even if, like, some people pick out, like, oh, it seems like they have a little bit of romantic tension in the second one, just for a brief second, you know, Hermione and Ron, and then here he gets so jealous. Like, is he jealous just because, again, he doesn't get what he thinks he ought to get, or is it like truly the love that's driving it? But either way, he does not act appropriately.
Well, I was gonna ask her because I just knew nobody else was gonna ask her.
I know, the way he says it. Yeah, his pride just was too much. Yeah, and it gave him, what, 3 months without his friend by saying, oh, I'll tell Hagrid to tell somebody about this dragon, but aside from that, he snubbed him for the 3 months. And meanwhile, Harry's sitting there just listening to people assume that he snuck into this tournament. Oh, Harry thinks he can get away with anything.
And Harry goes from the hero to a negative position.
Yet again.
And that had to be difficult for Harry, who was always used to being Mr. Good Guy.
Yeah,
And suddenly, through no fault of his own, for nothing he did, he's in the hot seat now.
right. And what kind of parallels do you see with this and book 2?
Over something like completely minuscule that he can't control, like talking to snakes, he is suddenly villainized by everyone he meets.
It's just aggravating for him because this is one, possibly a life or death situation that he's now been thrust into that he didn't even want to be part of. Or maybe he secretly wanted to be part of it, but he did not elect to be part of it. And so he's got that in his head, like, I could die. Oh, what else is new? It's Hogwarts, I guess. I'm just used to that.
Even at the beginning of the book, it says that there's a line about him talking about how he just wants a normal year at Hogwarts, and then
Yeah.
next thing you know, he's in the tournament at the age of 14 against 17-year-old like competitors. Like, he's so underqualified. Like, even though he's Harry Potter, they've had 3 years more of classes than him. Like, for any normal student.
And
Yeah, like
Yeah, he's still freshman.
yeah, he's still a freshman.
Yeah,
And Mooney pointed out to him, you don't think he won that?
right.
It was me. You didn't do, you're not the Marvel you think you are, boy.
Yeah, there at the end, him telling him the secrets of, I made sure that Hagrid knew about the dragons because I knew he couldn't keep a secret.
I mean, it was valid for him to do that though, because I don't think Harry would have been prepared at all for the dragons otherwise. Like,
Well, they said, in the book, they do say that it's customary for the champions to cheat.
it's just something that happens.
It's part of the fun.
To just at least to learn what
Just a
the
little.
tasks are, yeah, to prepare. Because, okay, so Harry's standing there and the dragon's in front of him and he summons his broom. What it doesn't show is the weeks of practicing that he doesn't know how to do that spell, and Hermione is trying to teach it to him day after day during their time at like their lunch breaks and their evenings. Like she gives up her entire schedule to make sure Harry can summon his broom during that championship.
That must have really got to Ron too.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything is Harry, everything is Harry.
Well, and at this point, Ron didn't want to talk to him anyway, but yeah.
Yeah.
I brought my 3 broomsticks. I've got a little, it's not little, it's a big ornament, but it's a small statue of the 3 broomsticks. I forgot to bring it last week when they were actually talking about the 3 broomsticks where Harry didn't get to go to the bar down at the village, but we do miss out on something in this book. And then all of a sudden in the 6th one, you see him get to go to the village and you're like, wait a minute, why does Harry get to go to the village now? Well, he has a godfather who can sign a letter and give it to Dumbledore now. So Sirius actually writes the letter to Dumbledore and says, please let him go to the village, signed his godfather. So now he gets to go to the village.
That must have been in one of the books, because I do
Yes.
remember that.
Yeah. And so they end up in the 3 broomsticks, and that's actually where Moody tells Hagrid about the dragons. And Harry is under his cloak, not because he has to be. He's allowed to be in the village this time. He just doesn't want anyone to see him because they're still wearing the Potter Stinks buttons, and he's very embarrassed. So then what are our other tasks? So we talked through the dragon a little bit, but any other thoughts on the second task in the lake? And
Well, I just
Harry's
thought it was very
heroism?
scary, and, you know, he was being a good guy to get both of them off the stick of whatever they were tied down with.
I know, that was just scary. I mean, what was going through Harry's head as to why he felt motivated to bring up more than Ron? First of all, I think, well, he looks across there and 3 out of those 4 people mean something to him, right? So there's Cho, who's his crush, Hermione and Ron, who are his best friends. So first of all, he might have just been like, these are my people. Who's for me, you know? But beyond that, what do you think is going through his head?
It's the saving people thing coming back again. It just continues throughout the books. It's just shown that he has like a compulsory need to save people. Just if there's anyone in danger, he's gonna go out of his way to save them. And that comes back a lot in the 7th book, especially, but in this one, it shows like an early form.
Well, the same was true in the Chamber of Secrets. I mean, he wasn't even that close to Ginny, but he went down there to get her. Yeah. And the same in the 3rd one. I mean, that he and Hermione risked a lot to get Sirius freed. They risked a lot. So he has that compulsion to just make sure that rights are wrong, wrongs are righted.
But stranger, because I didn't realize who that little girl was, and I thought, I didn't see that before. How come she's in the water? I mean, I didn't realize it until near the end. They said, and then whatever her name was, said, oh, this is my sister. And then you saved her, Harry.
Right. I helped a bit.
My question in watching that was, and what happened if one of the wizards didn't?
That's
Yeah.
that's the big question within the fans.
Oh, they're gonna let the kid sister die?
Yeah, like no one knows the answer to that. Like
It seemed that way, that they would have let them die.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all Harry had was that riddle that was inside of his egg. An hour long you have to look. Okay, I've got an hour, and then they die. Like,
And what did they put them under a spell to get them down there? Because they were getting
Spell.
summoned, Ron and Hermione, and the next thing you know, you see them underwater.
right, yeah. Oh, Professor McGonagall needs to see you both.
Right.
Okay?
That was weird, yeah.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I could see where Harry would panic and want to make sure that no one dies, you know?
You'd assume the adults would do something, but following previous track records.
It's possible they wouldn't, yeah,
Yeah, they do.
right? Yeah.
And Harry wasn't sure when the gilly worms were gonna wear off, gilly weed.
Well, they felt like they looked.
But they
like
said,
someone.
we think an hour, but nobody knows, so he was really putting himself in a lot of danger.
Right. I'm gonna look at something really fast on page 110 about this.
What was the name of that, the winner of the Quidditch game? Was that Crumb?
Victor Crumb.
I don't know if you noticed that in the water, he showed himself as a shark.
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody caught that.
I
I
didn't
know.
catch that.
He did
When it comes up out of the water, yeah.
They all kind of think that Laura had like a mouth, like a mask, right?
Like a bubble.
Right, that
Yeah.
she was
And
breathing
then,
into.
Cedric did the bubblehead charm.
They all kind of weigh to be under the water.
Yeah, Crumbs was cool. I liked his.
I didn't
human
notice his
transfiguration.
I find it funny that it was so difficult for Harry to figure out how to stay underwater like that, and it ended up being someone else telling him how. But yet there were still 3 other ways that were completely different from the way Harry did it. Like there's multiple ways for them to survive that task. And the same with the dragons. I mean, Crumb in the book says, that's really cool that you thought to use your broom. I mean, I'm a Quidditch star and I didn't even think of it, you know?
The other thing too, Harry always had the feeling that he was safe at Hogwarts, that nothing could happen to him bad. And now he's in this tournament,
Yeah.
and Dumbledore's already said, well, you know, you can die from this, and nobody is bailing out Harry. Harry's
Yeah.
gotta go through this.
Well, I'll get back to the Black Lake here in a second, but I think back most vividly to the scene right after they finished talking about it at the ceremony where the names came out of the goblet, because it's Snape and McGonagall and Dumbledore all in the office. And the 3 of them are conversing about what to do. And then McGonagall is like, you're saying to offer him up as bait? And Snape's like, well, yeah, I guess. I mean, what else do we have to do? And then Dumbledore's like, I agree with Severus. I'm gonna say, yeah, let's offer him up as bait. Like, what is it? What does Dumbledore know or think that is causing him to not step in here? I mean, it's like McGonagall said to him, when have you ever bowed down to the ministry? And yet he's letting it happen now. What is going through Dumbledore's head?
I always had the feeling that Dumbledore kind of knew from day one exactly what it was going to be. And he wasn't going to do anything that might change that. That there was not a karma, but there were certain steps involved that were going to take place before this final confrontation.
Like a prophecy type thing.
Yeah, and he was willing to let it play out.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think Dumbledore ever is 100% certain of anything, really. I think he has just a lot of plans and then backup plans in case those plans fail, and then more backup plans in case anything else goes wrong. Like he's very. I think he has some sort of like premonitions about maybe what will happen, but I don't think he ever is really like 100% certain. He's not a seer. He's not a practitioner of like divination or anything. He just has a lot of connections and a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge, but there's no like foresight that he has.
But for him to have all that intelligence, he would probably have some hunches.
Oh no, he definitely has hunches. Yeah, he definitely has plans for things to happen.
Look at the Sorcerer's Stone. Okay, well, I put a spell on it, only someone who didn't want it could be able to get it. Well, who the heck, you know, the book is saying, here's perfect Harry, you know, what are you doing to this kid? You keep setting him up. Don't be his friend, boy.
So many things feel like such setups, especially like the first book, because you can just see like like the flying getting the keys was for Harry, the chess was for Ron, because it talked about how good at chess he is. The riddle that's not mentioned in the movie, but it's mentioned in the book is for Hermione. Like, it's just those little things that I think it might have been unintentional on Rowling's part, they might have not been, but all of them just seem that Harry is directly like planned for, like all these actions, Dumbledore has taken them into account.
I was thinking to go back to Harry's thoughts. I'm going to read an excerpt from this book and then a quote from 2 Peter. So when we think about how Harry was slow in getting back out of the lake because of his concern to try and save all of the hostages, we can bear in mind the patience of God and his love for all of us who are in danger of perishing eternally. We may not understand fully what that means, just as Harry could not be sure of the full consequences of the hostage under the lake, but we show true heroism when we do all that we can to help share that love of Jesus with everyone. So it says in 2 Peter chapter 3, but do not ignore this one fact, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like 1 day. The Lord is not slow about his promise, as some think of slowness, but is patient with you, not wanting any of you to perish, but all to come to repentance. So I think about that with Harry's heroism and just like reaching out to, be kind to others and share God with others. But also I saw in there that 1 day is like 1,000 years and 1,000 years is like a day, because when the kids start talking to Harry afterwards, they actually said, oh, well, they just put us to sleep. Like, we just felt like a minute. Like, they had no clue how long they were under. Like, it was all night, like the night before, and like they're in this trance or whatever. So I found that to be an interesting part. Let's talk about Rita Skeeter a little bit. And
Is that the reporter?
that's the reporter,
She was stinking.
and the temptations of bearing false witness. So what did you guys pick up on Rita Skeeter?
She won't take no.
Yeah,
She's the worst type of journalist.
She was willing to spin the story, however,
With her
to
quick-
sell papers.
With her
wasn't
quick
it?
quotes quill.
Yes.
quotes, Will.
That's her
I like the
reporter.
part when she comes in, she's like, all bubbles.
Is this the book where Hermione gets like the blackmail on her? I forget
Yes,
when
but
that.
that's in the book, so we'll get.
Okay. I forget when things come into play.
So what scene do we meet her in? The champions are getting their photographs taken.
Right, and Hermione comes in and gives Harry a hug, and she's there. Flash,
Yes,
Yeah.
and now it's a special in the newspaper.
correct. But even before that, when we met her, the 4 champions were getting just posed for a picture. They had to miss class for a few minutes and they're just getting their photos taken.
First, right?
It's the long way
Never seen her, yeah.
And she interviews him, but in the open or in secret? Rolls him into the broom closet.
She's probably familiar with that.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And she kept calling him 12.
Yeah. So she just couldn't keep up with the facts. A young boy of 12, I'm 14. She was just trying to make the story worse than it was.
Yeah, sad and pathetic.
Yeah.
Because she, like in her thing, it talked about him, like his eyes shining with like the tears
Of his past.
Tears of his father.
Of his past, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, Ed.
Sensational.
Yeah, so she sensationalizes his story, bends the truth, and then later, you're right, she puts out another story after the first task that has some facts in it that are twisted
A bit.
a bit,
Triangle.
but are they twisted?
She gives the wrong age.
So, yes, but then there's the article that says Hermione has a knack for famous wizards.
Right.
Does she like Harry, or does she now like Crumb? Now, had they gone to the ball yet?
No.
How did Rita know that they were lovey-dovey?
Well, if you remember the scene when Crumb is walking down by the lake and he's being followed by all these little chippies.
Right.
What's he doing then, though? He's practicing his swimming.
Yeah, and he throws that look at Hermione when she's reading the book, and she kind of gives him that, I know you're looking smile.
Exactly.
But that's even after this article. Because it was right
Well, then we
between the
have
first
to-
and second
Then we
text.
have to assume that was going on. and
We have
don't
to
know.
assume that Rita Skeeter is sneakier than we know.
Does
Go
it
ahead.
ever, does it ever get revealed in the movie how she follows them? So you know how Sirius can turn into a dog and Peter can turn into a rat and stuff? She can turn into a beetle. And that's how she finds out her information. She's a little bug that flies around and follows people. She's like an actual bug, you know?
Isn't any book or anything?
It's in the book.
Is that in the movie?
No.
No, it is.
It shows in the movie, she's on the train with Hermione in the jar, and she's the little bug, she's the beetle. There's some.
And Harry complains about what?
Yes, and also that there's one in Hermione's hair. He's like brushing out of her hair on the, yeah. It's real subtle, but yeah.
Oh, I didn't, that's super subtle.
Ron's the beetle, because the director never mentions it outright.
The director never read the book. The director never read the book before he directed the movie.
It's so.
That's why I hate it.
It's the worst.
And also like the hair choices and.
Yeah, those boys' hair. I just can't.
It's the worst, we talked about, it's the worst hair movie.
And the clothing choices.
She shook her head a lot when we watched it, like that.
I totally get why Ron's robes are ugly. Like
I
they should
don't have enough imagination.
mom got from the secondhand shop. I get it, but
Also, there's this one choice in the beginning of the movie where, well, it talks about the students changing their robes on the train. And then it shows like all the other schools arriving, but the students are in like other clothes. And then suddenly they're in the Great Hall in their robes. And there's just no transition points between them. I'm very passionate about how bad this movie is.
Yeah, this is not her favorite. I
Yeah.
fully agree with you.
But we were complaining about it. We watched it.
yeah. So what do we think about this dark mark? Where do we see it? We see it in the sky.
Tattoo,
The
right?
left forearm.
That's a
We
tattoo.
see it on whose arms?
The one that's on- yeah.
Yeah, the Barty Crouch Jr.
And then he looked at Harry Potter's, I thought it was an injury.
Well, he had been cut so that some of his blood could go into Voldemort's potion.
Scar there.
Remember when they had to revive him from the dead? They took some of Harry's blood.
Yeah, he dropped it into the cauldron.
So Harry's blood, yeah, so we can go there first. Harry's blood is now flowing through Voldemort's veins. Not a lot of it, but think of all the protection that Harry has had because of these different charms that Dumbledore has put on him and all of that, that his mother put on him because of her sacrifice. And now Voldemort has some of that within him as well. So that's what we know.
Any blood protections now pretty much nullified.
Right, they
Yeah.
both have the same.
He now has it, like, and that's shown like when Voldemort is able to touch him in like the fourth book, because in the first one, Voldemort burned up when Harry touched him, but now they're completely fine and just.
Well, Harry
They're
wasn't
blood
fine.
brothers.
I figured Baltimore got stronger, much stronger.
Right, well, he's a human now.
Yeah.
Before, he was just kind of a creature in a way, that he was just a partial being. He was like a parasite in the first one. He was living off of the turban guy. The second one, we don't actually see him in any bodily form. We just see him in the memory form in the diary. And then the third one, he's not mentioned. So what we do gather from the beginning of this movie, where Harry's like having that dream, is we can assume, and the book talks about it, Wormtail scampered away as a rat between the third one and the fourth one and went and found Voldemort's partial body. And then he's like in this little like baby satchel sort of thing, and Voldemort is being raised up by and nourished by the rat, Wormtail, Peter Pettigrew, he has names. And then when Barty Crouch Jr. is like trying to get him back into full health by getting Harry's blood as part of this potion that will revive them. And where they are is in the cemetery, just in the same town where Tom Riddle grew up, or his family heritage was. He didn't grow up there, but where his mother and father had lived. And so that's why they were there, was the bone of his father needed to be in the spell.
The ritual was bone of the father, flesh of the servant, and blood of the enemy. The full thing.
Yeah. So they hocus pocus that and he
What,
rises up.
what I think, and I don't know about the book, but the movie I thought was interesting, I mentioned it, that the flesh of the servant, he gives so much of himself. He doesn't like throw the tip of his finger in there. You know, he throws his entire hand in there, and then he gets the blood from Harry. Like, it's a pretty deep cut, but it's not like a lot of blood, you know, like flinging it off the knife. And I just thought that was the Voldemort has gotten Wormtail so
Invested.
and that he's willing to give so much.
But
Like this.
he also says to him, it was out of fear.
Yeah,
that's right.
Most definitely.
It wasn't out of love, it was out of fear that you did what you.
Or even
Well,
loyalty.
And what that reminds me of is, yeah, like the loyalty and all that, but it's like cult leaders.
Right.
And stuff like that, where people they will require like a pound, or will have like an expectation of like just to be near the leader. You know, it's like, oh, I can give this much type of thing. You know, like that's, and I say cult leaders just as a blanket statement
Yeah.
for, you know, that kind of stuff. And that really stood out to me in the movie, was how much he gave of himself. 'Cause he would have drained Harry if it mattered.
Right.
You know, and he cut his hand. Yeah.
It's not like Pettigrew has anywhere else to turn. Like, there's nowhere else for him to go. If he doesn't prove to Voldemort that he is the most useful, most loyal one there, there's nowhere else for him. He's just useless. Like, because
He's supposed to already be dead.
and Voldemort, it's not like Voldemort would hesitate to kill him either. Like, he has to constantly prove his worth to stay alive.
But isn't that the way it is in life?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, if you take the wrong step, you're out, you're shunned, you're chastised, you're thrown out.
Yeah.
Do your notes say anything at all about the maze?
They don't. We can talk about the maze.
I saw the maze as a symbol of life.
Okay.
They went into this maze not knowing where they were going. They had a goal, but in traversing this maze, some of them changed. And even when it gets down to the point where Harry is not sure he's going to go back and save the other guy. I mean, he said, I didn't think you were gonna come. And he said, for a minute there, I wasn't sure I was either. And I thought that was the symbol. That's because that was my first thought. When they went into the maze, I said, that's life. They went into life, and it happened. It can happen to any one of us. You go in a certain way, and then circumstances happen, and that changes.
Yeah.
Well, and also, it is like Harry throughout the entire games is pretty noble with getting the people out of the water, and then also how he goes back and saves Cedric, but ends up killing him. But aside from that, he's still doing that where he goes, all right, at the same time, you know.
Yeah.
And
But then later, I always felt that he carried a certain amount of guilt. That if he hadn't told him, let's both touch it at the same time. When he was crying over the body, that was my first thought. I was projecting myself.
Yeah.
That's how I would feel. Oh God, I was trying to be fair, and I told him we'll both touch it, and because of that, I brought him to this situation. He was killed because
Yeah, no, this death is definitely the one that affects Harry the most. Like his parents' death, he can't really remember it. It got him stuck in a very bad situation with the Dursleys, but it's not like he had an emotional attachment to his parents. Like they're people that obviously like, they're like his parents, like he's an orphan. But Cedric's death was his friend, like his friend got killed. Like he's been through a tournament with him and he had to watch him die. Like that, Harry definitely has some like survivor's guilt over that.
And in some ways, even feeling that it's his own fault. But what I find interesting is that even through that guilt, it doesn't deter Harry from trying to save others. He just keeps doing it, maybe recklessly, but that's not enough to deter him from that Gryffindor trait of bravery.
But I think that also affected him in the sense of, I have to, I can't let it go. This one slipped by me and it caused somebody's death. I can't let this happen.
No, that's totally true.
It's like Harry went right over the girl and everything there for that split second and everything, like he wants to go. And then all of a sudden you see him go to one.
Right, yeah, when he makes sure that Fleur doesn't die, yeah. Because she can't send up her own spark of save me.
Well, and I think it's interesting too with the, there's such a complexity to is it Cedric, is that his name? Yeah. It's such a complexity to that because Harry did the right thing with doing like going back and getting and you can tell the maze is designed for Harry to win. It's with Crumb getting bewitched and.
Well, and Mad Eye starts it by pointing. Did you notice?
Yeah.
Mad Eye's like,
Well, and
that
that's
way.
playful. That's
Yeah,
playful, yeah.
one of the only.
Yeah. But there's often consequences even when you do the right thing. Life isn't just karma. Like there's good and bad that happens in good and bad.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like, and that's hard to reconcile. Like when life falls apart and you can still go, okay, and still move forward.
Right.
That's a hard thing.
So there's an element that doesn't get addressed in the movie that I'll just help us transition to the next one, because Chris was saying, is it the next one where we start seeing the ministry try to just hold on to any sense of power that it can? And yes, it is. So as you're watching,
becomes fascist.
The-
It already
yeah.
is.
But the next one, they're really.
Full on fascism.
So we get to the end of this one, and you hear the Minister of Magic say, Dumbledore, a boy's been killed. And so you hear some of that tension or whatever, but then it just cuts the scene and takes you to the dungeon or the castle where we end up finding out that Barty Crouch Jr. is the one that's, gotten Mad-Eye Moody and all of that. Well, in the book, we have a transition from book 4 to 5 that will help you as you go to watch the next movie. So the Minister of Magic comes in and is having a meeting with Dumbledore, because Dumbledore has a lot of power, but Dumbledore doesn't have, or has a lot of influence, but he doesn't necessarily have a powerful position. But the minister does not agree that Voldemort has come back. He doesn't believe Harry. He wants to assume it's not true because he wants to protect his people. He wants to be in charge, and that undermines his authority if there's a rise in evil, right? So he's just like, I can't deal with this. There's no way this guy's back. There's no way. And so as you're watching the 5th one, recognize that the last chapter in the book is called The Parting of the Ways. And this is where we do get that quote where Dumbledore says in the final feast to the students, Cedric Diggory was killed. You should all know this. There are some in the ministry who do not want you to know this, but I want you to know this. So they have this moment of their authority figure, their headmaster, saying, this was not an accident. Voldemort killed your friend. And The next day, that entire student body goes home. They have the newspaper all summer that we're already finding out Rita Skeeter's not the most honest, and Fudge, the Prime Minister or Minister of Magic, he is not wanting to believe this. And so the kids go home and they don't have that connection to the truth for this whole summer. So when you're watching the next one, especially notice where the boys get back to school and they're in the dorm, and Seamus, who's been good friends with Harry, remember they played the animal game in the dorm in the third movie. Seamus comes back and he's like, my mother doesn't think you're telling the truth. And so Harry fights socially throughout a lot of the book with his previously loved friends who now are like, I need to stay away from you because you're loony. You think that this guy died from the hand of Lord Voldemort and there's something wrong with you. So keep in mind that we've got this stuff kind of going off in the works. And as you're watching and you see the whole Umbridge character come out with the Minister of Magic's appointee for the school, just be thinking about what it is that Fudge is trying to hold on to in the Ministry of Magic versus what's really happening that he's not ready to acknowledge. And then you get to the very end of the fifth one, you see him, see Voldemort, and then Voldemort disappears, and then Fudge goes, Harry just said that. When he gets back and he's hovering with Cedric, he goes, he's back, Voldemort's back. So be thinking of those two things. I didn't want to go too far into like the fifth one, but like be thinking and be ready for that because there's some subtle things that don't get mentioned in the movie that will help you enjoy the fifth one a little bit more. So I wanted to help you with that just a little bit. And the last thing I just wanted to say, Harry has a conversation with Dumbledore. And this is in the book too, because Dumbledore goes to Harry's dorm and they have a little conversation, right? Harry got a chance to see his parents. What happened? Could you tell what happened?
Was that in the cemetery?
That's when his
In the
parents.
cemetery?
Down.
Yeah. So Dumbledore was explaining, there is no spell that can reawaken the dead. However, when their wands connected, for whatever reason the wands connected, Dumbledore's not really sure. He can assume some things, but their wands connected, and what that was doing was it was making Voldemort's wand relive its previous spells, most recent, and then back and back. So if they had held that connection for 2 hours, it would have relived even more spells. But what that wand was doing was it was reliving the most recent spells. That wand was used to kill Cedric. That wand had been used most recently before that to kill Harry's parents. So that's why he was able to see them. And another lady who's not mentioned, and it's not worth mentioning now. But may she rest in peace. And so that was a special moment for Harry, right? He has his chance to have a little bit of a connection with his parents again. And there's just a little bit more for him to remember what he's fighting for. Like
A little encouragement for him, I think.
Yeah. So, any other final thoughts on this one?
I have a stupid question.
Go ahead.
Did anybody like the dress Hermione had for the ball?
Does anybody like what?
What was that? What was that, Lee?
Say it again.
Oh, did anybody like the dress Hermione had for the ball?
It was form-fitting, so it showed
I
all.
didn't get that far yet.
I didn't care for the color.
I like the blue in the book.
She
It's a
came
periwinkle in the book.
She came down the stairs. I took one look at her and I said,
Her hair was pretty.
her hair was gorgeous. But that
I thought it was an okay dress.
Well, it was okay.
It's like this.
Harry was dressed
You
in
guys
the
are what we
night.
talk about with the school
No.
bullying.
Did you see what she was wearing?
Yeah. Talking about the student body.
Yeah.
Oh,
She Because they went to the ball thinking they would be dancing and having their good time. And Ron and Harry were just duds. They just sat on the chair and.
They needed the status of a date. They didn't actually want a date, right?
I know, but that was bad. for
Ron and Harry
girls.
should have went together.
Yeah. But who would have led the date? Yeah. So they're featured over there in my Yule Ball scene. Thank you, Pam, for getting my Legos set up before everybody else got here. Parvati and Padma have Legos over there, so you can watch that. Also, the it actually spins and you can see them dance. They're on the little platform. So be thinking about that transition of power from what is Fudge trying to hold on to and at what cost as you watch this Umbridge character terrorize the children in the next one. Yeah.
Next week's my favorite book.
So just be ready.
Great.
My personal best book.
That one's well worn.
I've read it at least 20 times.
Yeah.
I will just reread that one. Like, I won't read any of the other ones. I'll just get that one out.
That's exciting. Okay.
I mean, from here on out, the movies are just one banger after
Yeah, they get darker and darker. We can barely
So-
see them.
I
another.
know.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like in the 6th one, when
like
they're
this
in that cave, like you can hardly see a thing. Yeah.
It's harder for us older folks.
Yeah.
Well, and what's brilliant, and like, this movie stuff coming out, I've been trying not to talk about just how they make movies and stuff, but the last movie, it's so dark until Voldemort dies. And it's just like,
Yeah, if you look at all
the
this,
first movie.
if you look at all of the scenes like put together on like a long like list, it starts out really light colors and then it transitionally gets darker and darker as the movies progress, and then it's light. It's
I'll read, if I remember, I'll read them. Or
really-
better yet, if you want to have time this week and like put that together, because I know what you're talking about, I've seen it.
on my phone
If
somewhere.
you can send it, get it to us, we can put it up there.
We won't be here, hopefully.
Okay, but what it does is it takes 1 second of every scene, every like 2 minutes in the movie, and it puts the color of what's on that screen from the beginning to the end. And you can get it from any movie, Gone with the Wind, anything. But yeah, it's a neat, and you can buy them as like artwork for the wall.
And that's the end. So that's where it's like very like lined,
Yeah,
right?
it's very dark.
You're gonna be missing the skiving snack box.
Do it. She has all like lighter
See the
colors.
brightness of the end.
Not to have the
So we're not staying on it forever.
So Judy, as you can see, that is interesting. I never knew that.
Yeah,
It
they
was
get
dark
so-
to the whole.
They progressively get darker.
Adios.
Judy, let her show you, but.
Thanks for joining. We'll get that picture out later. Oh, the camera is like auto adjust.
Yeah, it does.
How cool is that? Thank you.
Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you.
You too. Bye. How do I get out of here?